Hey, you're listening to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, leave a comment with your location. I always read them. If these quiet, eerie stories are your thing, make sure to subscribe. Quick note, there may be a few ads early on, but after that, it's just silence and the story. Now, settle in, let the world fade away, and listen closely. Story 1. I am sitting on the concrete floor of the cold storage room in my basement, with my back pressed hard against the thick wooden door. The old lock is still holding for now, but the frame is weak. Every time they push on the handle from the other side, the wood groans and cracks a little more. I already called emergency services. The dispatcher told me officers are on the way, but the nearest patrol car is still far out. I do not know how much time I have left before this door gives in. So, I am writing everything down while I still can. I need a record of what happened today. I need the police to understand one thing before they step inside this house. The two people in the basement hallway outside this room are not my parents, no matter how perfectly they wear my mother's face and my father's voice. This morning started completely normal. I spent the entire morning at the university, sitting in a giant lecture hall under those awful bright lights, finishing the last exam of my degree. For 2 weeks straight, I had barely slept. I lived on coffee, energy drinks, and stress. Every waking hour went into studying. I was exhausted in the deepest possible way, like my brain had been scraped empty. When I handed in my paper and walked out of the building, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Relief. Real relief. It was like a heavy weight slid off my shoulders all at once. I remember thinking that the worst part was over. I was finally done. All I wanted was to go home, take a long shower, maybe eat something small, and then sleep until the next morning. The walk from campus to my house takes around 40 minutes. The weather was warm and clear, and the whole neighborhood was quiet. Most of the adults in our area work office jobs, so during the day the streets are usually empty. Just rows of houses, trimmed lawns, parked cars, and still sidewalks. I walked the familiar route on autopilot, letting my mind slowly come down from the pressure of the exam. Everything felt ordinary, peaceful even. I pictured exactly what I would find when I got home. My mother would probably be at the kitchen island reading a novel or flipping through a magazine. My father would most likely be in the living room, watching one of those history documentaries he loves. That is their afternoon routine almost every day. Predictable, boring, safe. I walked up the driveway, climbed the front steps, and pulled my keys from my pocket. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the heat. My parents are obsessive about the thermostat. They keep the house cool all year to save money, to the point where I usually need a hoodie indoors. But the second I stepped through the doorway, a wave of thick, suffocating warmth hit me right in the face. It felt like opening the door to a greenhouse in the middle of summer. The air was heavy, stale, and strangely wet. Within seconds, I could feel sweat gathering under my shirt. The second thing I noticed was the smell. It hung in the air like something alive, metallic, sour, and thick. It smelled like old coins soaked in spoiled milk, with something acidic underneath that stung the back of my throat. It was such a strong smell that it almost made me stop right there in the hallway. I shut the door behind me and dropped my backpack to the floor. The sound echoed through the house much louder than it should have. Usually, if I come in and make any noise at all, my mother calls out right away. She always asks how my day went, or whether I want tea. But that afternoon, the whole house was silent. No television, no kitchen radio, no footsteps. Nothing. I started down the hallway, slowly taking off my jacket as I moved toward the back of the house. My stomach had already started to tighten, though I did not know why yet. When I stepped into the kitchen, I saw them. My mother and father were standing together by the stove. They were standing very close, shoulder to shoulder, both facing a large metal pot on the front burner. They were so still that for a second they looked like they had been frozen in place. They did not turn when I entered. They just kept staring down into the pot. "I'm home," I said. Then they turned around. Both at exactly the same time. Not naturally either. They did not turn their heads first and then shift the rest of their bodies. Their whole bodies rotated together in one smooth, unnatural motion, like mannequins on display stands. And then they smiled. It was my parents' faces, but the smiles were wrong. Too wide, too tight. The skin stretched strangely around their mouths. Their eyes did not match the expression at all. Their eyes were wide open and empty, as if they were looking at a point just past me, instead of actually seeing me. "Welcome to the residence," my mother said. "How was the academic evaluation?" my father asked. That was the moment real fear first touched me. Not a full panic yet, just a cold feeling forming low in my stomach. The words were wrong. The tone was wrong. My father would never say, "academic evaluation." He would ask if the test was hard, or if I thought I passed, or whether I was finally free. He always speaks casually. They both do. But what I was hearing sounded stiff and formal, like someone trying to imitate people after only reading about them in a manual. "It was fine," I said carefully. "I think I did well. Why is it so hot in here? Is the thermostat broken?" Neither of them looked at the thermostat on the wall. "The temperature is optimal for the preparation of the sustenance," my mother said. Then she turned back toward the stove with that same strange full-body motion. She picked up a wooden spoon and started stirring the contents of the pot. I remember staring at her arm, because even that looked wrong. She was not bending her wrist or elbow the way a person naturally would. Her arm moved in one stiff circular motion, driven almost entirely from the shoulder, like it was one solid piece. I stepped a little closer, mostly because I wanted to know what smelled so horrible. I looked into the pot. I wish I had not. Inside was a thick, dark gray paste, bubbling slowly over the heat. Through it ran deep red streaks, like veins. Every now and then, the mixture hissed and spat onto the stovetop. As the spoon dragged through it, pale rubbery chunks rose to the surface and sank again. I could not identify a single thing in that pot as food. It looked like industrial sludge, mixed with raw flesh. "You should proceed to your room and rest," my father said behind me. "We will notify you when the consumption period begins." I did not argue. Every instinct in my body was telling me to get away from them. I nodded, backed out of the kitchen, grabbed my backpack from the hallway, and went upstairs to my room. The second I got inside, I locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to think. At first, I tried to make it rational. Maybe there had been some kind of gas leak. Carbon monoxide. Maybe both of them were confused or poisoned or having some kind of shared neurological episode. Maybe they had taken medication they should not have mixed. I kept trying to build a normal explanation because the other possibilities felt too insane. Then I pulled out my phone and texted my mother, "Are you okay?" A few seconds later, I heard her phone chime from downstairs in the kitchen. I waited. No reply. No footsteps on the stairs. No voice calling up to ask why I was texting from inside the house. Just silence. Then, Faintly, I heard the scraping of the wooden spoon in the pot again. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still nothing. That was when I realized I needed to know what had happened in the house before I got home. Our neighborhood has a shared outdoor security system. Several houses on the street have cameras, and the footage is uploaded to a shared cloud server so people can check for package theft or suspicious activity. The house directly across from ours has a wide-angle camera over their garage. I knew from helping set it up last year that it had a clear view of our driveway and front porch. I logged into the security portal on my phone and opened the camera feed from across the street. Then I pulled up the archive from earlier in the day. I went back to just after I had left that morning. At first, everything looked normal. Cars passed. A neighbor walked her dog. The front of our house looked perfectly ordinary. I skipped forward. Then, at 12:34, someone entered the frame. A tall man in a faded brown jacket and loose gray trousers. I stopped fast-forwarding and watched him carefully. Even through the camera feed, something about him was deeply wrong. He walked like a machine trying to copy a person. His torso stayed completely upright and rigid. His arms hung motionless at his sides and never swung. His legs lifted too high with each step, then dropped heavily, like an invisible puppeteer did not quite understand how human walking works. He reached the edge of our driveway and stopped, all at once, not gradually, just instantly, like someone had hit pause. He stood there for a full minute, facing the street. Then his head turned toward our house in one sharp motion. He walked up the driveway and climbed the porch steps with the same stiff, awful movement. Then he knocked on the front door 3 times. A few seconds later, my mother opened the door. Even from the camera, I could see the confusion on her face. She leaned slightly forward the way people do when they are about to ask a stranger what they want. The man said nothing. He simply stepped forward into her space. My mother stumbled back into the hallway, and he entered the house. The front door swung shut behind him. I sat on my bed staring at the screen, frozen. Then I dragged the timeline forward. 1 o'clock, empty porch. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, empty porch. 4 o'clock, there I was on the screen, walking up the driveway and letting myself inside. The man had never come back out. That meant he was still in the house when I got home. I looked up from my phone and stared at my bedroom door. I had been inside for 20 minutes by then. I had not seen any stranger. Our house is not large. There are only so many places an adult man can hide. Unless he was not hiding. Unless whatever had entered the house was what I had just spoken to in the kitchen. That thought was so terrible, I almost rejected it immediately. But there was no other explanation that made sense. I knew I had to look. I unlocked my door as quietly as I could, careful not to let the latch click. I opened it just enough to listen. The scraping sound from the kitchen had stopped. The house was silent again. I stepped into the upstairs hall and checked every room. Guest room, empty. Bathroom, empty. My father's office, empty. There was no sign of anyone up there. That left only the first floor and the basement. I crept to the top of the stairs and looked down into the living room. My parents had moved. Now, they were sitting side by side on the sofa. Their backs were perfectly straight. Their hands rested flat on their knees. They were staring at the television. The screen was off. Black. They were watching a blank screen in total silence. I stayed there for at least 2 minutes, just watching them. Neither of them blinked. Neither of them shifted. I could not even see their chests move with breathing. They looked like figures arranged in a museum display. The basement door is in the kitchen, which meant I would have to go downstairs, pass behind the sofa, and move through the kitchen without them noticing. I do not know how I found the nerve to do it, but I did. I went down one careful step at a time, putting my weight along the edges of the boards so they would not creak. I crossed behind the sofa. Their heads never moved. Their eyes stayed fixed on the dead television. I slipped into the kitchen. The pot still sat on the stove. Its contents had begun to cool into a thick, glossy mass. But the smell in the kitchen had changed. The metallic scent was weaker now. In its place came something much worse, leaking from beneath the basement door. It smelled like raw meat rotting in chemical cleaner. I opened the basement door slowly and winced when the hinges squeaked. I froze and listened. Nothing. I stepped inside and gently shut the door behind me. The basement is unfinished. Concrete floor. No windows. Stacks of old boxes, furniture, decorations, and junk from years of storage. Once the door closes, it is completely dark. I turned on my phone flashlight and started down the stairs. The air was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. The deeper I went, the worse the smell became. I swept the light around the room. Old mattress, rusted bicycle, plastic bins, stacks of cardboard boxes. Then I moved farther back, toward the cold storage room in the far corner. That was where I found the clothes. A faded brown jacket, baggy gray trousers, heavy worn shoes. They lay collapsed in a loose pile on the floor, exactly matching what the man on the security camera had been wearing. I crouched down and moved the light beyond them. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. My brain refused to name it. It looked pale and wet and rubbery, a large collapsed shape on the concrete. Then I leaned closer. It was skin, an entire human skin. Torso, arms, legs, head, all of it whole but empty, lying there like a deflated suit, bloodless, waxy, flattened. I moved the light to the face. The stranger's face stared upward, but it had collapsed inward where the bones should have supported it. The eye sockets were dark holes. The hair still clung to the scalp. Down the length of the back ran a huge ragged tear from neck to spine, as if whatever had been inside had split it open and stepped out. I nearly dropped my phone. In that instant, everything became horribly clear. The man who entered our house was not a man. It had worn that skin into the house, and if that skin was now lying empty in the basement, then whatever had come out of it was already upstairs, already wearing my parents. Right then, a heavy creak sounded above me, a footstep, from the kitchen floor. I killed my flashlight immediately and stood in total darkness, barely breathing. Then, the basement door at the top of the stairs opened. Warm yellow kitchen light spilled down over the steps. "We are aware of your location," my father's voice called down. The voice was flat, calm, wrong. "Why are you standing in the disposal area?" my mother asked. "The sustenance is prepared," my father said. "The consumption period has begun." Their shadows stretched down the stairs toward me. And those shadows were not human. The light from upstairs should have cast two familiar outlines. Instead, I saw shapes with too many angles, too many joints, limbs bending in places limbs should not bend. The edges shifted and pulsed as if their stolen forms were no longer holding together properly. I backed away in the dark and moved toward the cold storage room. I found the door by touch, slipped inside, and slammed it shut behind me. Then I twisted the old iron deadbolt until it clicked. The sound must have echoed through the whole basement, because the footsteps started immediately. Slow, heavy, perfectly in sync. They came down the stairs, side by side. I pulled out my phone and called emergency services. I whispered my address and told the dispatcher there were intruders in the house, that my parents were dead, and that whatever killed them was in the basement with me. She told me help was coming. Now I am here, sitting on the floor with my back braced against the door, typing this as fast as I can. They are right outside. I can hear their breathing through the wood. It sounds wet, thick, and wrong, like mud being forced through a pipe. You have secured the barrier, my father's voice said a moment ago. This is an inefficient action. The barrier will not prevent the transition. Then my mother's voice. Open the barrier. You must consume the sustenance. We require your biological material to continue the expansion. They are pushing harder now. The wood near the lock is cracking. Small splinters keep falling onto my shoulders and the floor. I am posting this anywhere I can, hoping someone sees it, hoping the police see it, hoping that if officers come to the front door and my mother answers with that wide, tight smile, they will not believe what they see, because those things are hollow. Whatever they are hollow. And now the pressure on the door is getting worse. The barrier is failing, my mother just said. Prepare for consumption. I do not have a weapon in here. Only my phone. Only the light on it. If they break through before the sirens get here, I am going to shine the light directly into their faces. I need to see what is really looking out through my parents' eyes before they tear the skin from my back and wear me next. If anyone reads this before the police arrive, please believe me. Please tell them not to trust the faces. I can hear the wood splitting now. I have to go. Story 2. My son started talking to someone in the attic 3 weeks ago. The problem is, we do not have an attic. Our house is a small, single-story rental with low ceilings and barely any storage. There is no space above the rooms, no crawl space, no hidden loft, nothing. I know that for a fact, because when we moved in, I complained about it more than once. I remember standing in the hallway with my wife, looking up at the flat ceiling, and joking that the house felt like it had been built to keep people from owning too much. There was nowhere to hide boxes, nowhere to store old furniture, nowhere to shove the things you did not want to look at every day. Everything about the place was simple and small and easy to understand. That is why I brushed it off the first time my son mentioned the attic lady. He was sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal and staring out the window in that distracted way children do, half in the real world and half in whatever world they make for themselves. He is 5 years old, and at that age, imaginary friends are normal. Imaginary games are normal. Strange little sentences that make no sense are normal too. So when he said it, I smiled without thinking. She hums when you're sleeping, he told me. I looked at him over my coffee. Who does? He took another bite of cereal and answered like it was obvious. The attic lady. I laughed softly and told him we did not have an attic. I said it gently, the way you talk to a child when you do not want to ruin the game, but also do not want to encourage it too much. I expected him to smile or change the subject. Instead, he looked confused, like I was the one being strange. Yes, we do, he said. It's just small. There was something about the certainty in his voice that bothered me. Not enough to scare me, not at first, but enough to stay with me through the rest of the day. That night, after I tucked him into bed, I checked the whole house. I opened every closet and looked at every ceiling vent. I stood in the hallway, and stared at every square foot above me, searching for some panel or hatch I might have missed when we moved in. I even went outside with a flashlight and walked around the house, shining the beam up along the roofline like I expected to find some hidden opening. There was nothing. The house was exactly what it had always been. Small, flat, ordinary. Still, after I put him to bed, I found myself standing outside his room longer than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only shows up late at night, when the refrigerator stops humming and the street outside goes still and your own breathing starts to sound too loud. Then I heard it. A low humming sound, soft, slow, almost gentle. It was not coming from my son's room. It was coming from above it. I froze right there in the hallway and stared at the ceiling. The humming stopped immediately. I stood there for at least a full minute, waiting for it to start again, but the silence stayed heavy and complete. After a while, I told myself it had to be something else. Pipes, wind, my imagination. A sound from outside hitting the roof at the right angle. There are 100 little noises a house can make at night if you let yourself focus too hard on them. The next morning, I asked him about it. I tried to sound casual, like I was just continuing the game. "She only hums when you're sad," he said. I forced a smile. "I'm not sad." He shrugged and looked down into his cereal bowl. "You are at night." I did not answer him, because he was right. My wife died 8 months ago in a car accident. It happened so quickly that my mind still refuses to process parts of it. Some days, it feels sharp and fresh, like it happened yesterday. Other days, it feels unreal, like I only dreamed the hospital, the phone calls, the funeral, the silence afterward. What I remember most clearly is the quiet that came after everyone left. The way the house felt too big and too empty all at once. The way nighttime changed. During the day, I could stay busy. I could clean, work, cook, answer messages, take care of my son, pretend I was still moving forward. But at night, when he was asleep, and the lights were low, and there was nothing left to distract me, the grief always came back. I thought I had hidden that from him. Apparently, I had not. After that first night, the humming became more frequent. Always after midnight, always above his room. Never loud enough for me to capture properly on my phone. I tried more than once. I would hear it, fumble for my phone, stand in the hallway recording the ceiling like an idiot. And when I played it back later, there would be almost nothing there. Maybe the faintest vibration. Maybe a soft sound that could have been anything at all. Nothing solid. Nothing I could show anyone and say, "There, listen, tell me I am not imagining this." But when I pressed my ear against the ceiling in his room, I could feel it. That was the part I could not explain. There was a faint vibration under the drywall. Not loud, not strong, but real. It felt like someone resting their throat against the other side and humming softly into it. We did not have floorboards above us. There was no other side. He sounded annoyed before I even finished explaining. "There's no attic," he said. "You've seen the house plans." I had seen the house plans. When we signed the lease, he showed them to me because I had asked about storage. There was no hidden space above the bedrooms, no loft, no sealed-off section, nothing. I thanked him, hung up, and felt no better at all. 3 nights ago, my son woke me up. I had only been asleep for maybe an hour. He stood beside my bed in the dark, one hand on my arm, his face pale in the blue light from the window. "She's crying," he whispered. I sat up and checked the clock. 2:17 a.m. At first, I did not hear anything. Then, slowly, the humming began again. But this time, It was different. It shook. It trembled in a way that made my stomach drop. It sounded less like humming and more like someone trying not to cry, trying to hold themselves together and failing. My son climbed into my lap and pressed against me. "She says you don't visit anymore," he said quietly. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. "Visit where?" I asked. He pointed up. "The ceiling." I do not know why I did what I did next. Maybe grief makes people stupid. Maybe it makes them desperate. Maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, there was a part of me that wanted this to be impossible, because impossible things sometimes feel kinder than real life. I dragged a chair into his room and climbed onto it. The humming went on above me, low and uneven. I raised both hands and pressed my palms flat against the ceiling. The sound stopped immediately. The silence that followed felt huge, heavy, like the entire house was waiting. Then something pressed back. From the other side, warm, wide, gentle. My breath caught in my throat so hard it almost hurt. I nearly fell from the chair. Every part of me went cold except for my hands. Because through the ceiling, through solid drywall where there should have been nothing at all, I could feel the shape of two palms meeting mine. It did not push. It did not scratch or force its way through. It just rested there, careful, almost tender, like someone lining up their hands with mine. Below me, my son smiled like this was the most natural thing in the world. "She missed you," he whispered. I felt tears burn my eyes before I could stop them. For those few seconds, I did not know what I believed. I only knew what I felt. Warmth, contact, a presence that did not feel cruel or hungry or violent. Just sad, achingly sad. Then, little by little, the pressure faded. The warmth drained away, and the humming returned. Softer now, lighter, almost relieved. Yesterday, while my son was at school, I decided I needed proof. I told myself that was the only reason, that I was not chasing hope, or grief, or madness. I just needed something logical to hold on to. Insulation, wiring, a hidden pipe, some builder's mistake, anything. I got a ladder from the garage, carried it into my son's room, and cut a small square into the ceiling. I expected dust to fall, bits of plaster, maybe wood or metal or old wiring. There was nothing, no insulation, no beams, no crawl space, just darkness. Not the normal kind of darkness you see inside a wall or between beams. Not empty darkness. This felt thick, packed, close, as though the moment the ceiling opened, I was not looking into space but into something that was already pressed right up against the cut. I shined my flashlight into it. The beam did not travel. It did not disappear into depth. It stopped almost immediately, like it had hit something invisible. That was when I heard the voice clearly for the first time. A whisper. My name. Not from far away. Not from above. From just inches beyond the drywall opening. I dropped the flashlight and stumbled backward, so hard I knocked into the dresser. By the time I looked up again, my heart hammering, the ceiling was smooth. The hole was gone. Completely gone. No cut marks, no broken plaster, no dust on the floor, nothing. Just a normal ceiling. I stood there shaking for a long time, trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. But the knife I had used was still in my hand. The ladder was still there. The flashlight was on the floor where I had dropped it. Something had happened. I just could not explain it. Last night, the humming came back again. Only this time it sounded stronger, closer, not like it was above us, but like it was pressing down through the room. My son sat up in bed and looked at the ceiling with that same calm expression he always had when he talked about her. "She says she can't stay much longer," he said. I felt my chest tighten. "Why?" He kept staring upward. "She says it hurts to hold the house up." I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just nerves. "Hold the house up. She says she's been holding it since the accident." My mouth went dry. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something childish, something random, something that would bring all of this back into the world of pretend. Instead, he said, very quietly, "She says you weren't supposed to survive." The room felt smaller after that. The air changed. The humming stopped all at once. Then the house creaked. Not a normal creak, not wood settling or pipes shifting. It was a long, deep groan that moved through the walls and under the floor, like the whole structure was straining under a weight it had barely managed to carry. I looked up. The ceiling above us bowed inward, only slightly, just enough to see it, enough to make my blood run cold. There, pressed down through the drywall, was the shape of two hands. Huge hands, wide and careful, holding, supporting. My son lifted one of his little hands toward them. "Don't let go," he said softly. The humming started again, but it was shaking now, tired, strained, and for the first time since the accident, I said the words out loud. "I'm sorry." I do not even know exactly who I was saying it to. My wife, my son, myself. Whatever was in the ceiling. All I know is that the second I said it, the pressure changed. The hands seemed to ease. The ceiling slowly flattened back into place. The groaning in the walls stopped, and the humming faded, not abruptly, but gradually, like something moving farther and farther away. By the time it was gone, it sounded almost like wind. Tonight, the house is quiet. Too quiet. There is no humming above my son's room anymore. No vibration when I touch the ceiling. No warmth. Earlier this evening, after I put him to bed, I stepped outside and stood in the yard looking up at the roof. That was when I noticed it. There is a slight dip over his bedroom, not dramatic, just enough to catch the eye once you know to look for it. It looks like something heavy used to rest there, something that was carrying more than it should have. I do not know what was in the ceiling. I do not know why it sounded like grief, or why it seemed to know my name, or why my son spoke about it like it had always been there. I do not know whether it was something that loved us, something that pitied us, or something that simply stayed because no one told it to leave. I only know this. The night of the accident, I was driving too. My wife was beside me. There was rain, headlights, a sound like the world being torn open, and then a gap in my memory that I still cannot fully cross. I lived. She did not. For months, I have carried that fact like a weight I could never put down. I have thought about timing, angles, impact, luck. I have replayed it 1,000 times in my mind, wondering why I walked away when she did not. Now, when I think back to that emptiness, to that impossible survival, I cannot stop hearing my son's voice. "She says you weren't supposed to survive." Maybe that was only a child repeating nonsense. Maybe it was grief making meaning out of fear. Or maybe there really was something above us all this time. Something humming in the dark. Something holding together what should have already fallen apart. If this house ever collapses one day, I think I will understand why. And if you ever hear humming above you at night, even though your house has no attic, maybe do not rush to explain it away. Maybe do not run for blueprints or measurements or logic right away. Maybe just listen. Because sometimes something stays longer than it should. Sometimes something remains after the accident, after the funeral, after the silence settles in and everyone else leaves. And sometimes whatever stays behind is the only reason you are still here. Story 3. Most people probably won't believe this. And honestly, I understand why. Back when it happened, nobody believed me either. I'm in my 30s now, and I have no reason to make something like this up. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm not trying to go viral or prove anything. This is just one of those memories that never left me. It stayed with me all these years, and even now, it comes back to me more often than I want it to. This happened when I was around 10 or 11 years old. It was summer, and I had soccer practice that evening. I remember that part clearly. The heat had been hanging in the air all day, and the grass smelled fresh and damp in that way it does after people have been running over it for hours. Everything about that evening felt normal. It was practice like any other. Kids yelling across the field, coaches blowing whistles, parents standing around talking, water bottles rolling near the benches. Nothing strange happened there. Nothing that should have made that night different from any other. And then there's a gap. That is still the part that bothers me most. I remember soccer practice. I remember being there. I remember the feeling of being tired afterward. But I do not remember leaving. I do not remember getting in a car. I do not remember going to a friend's house. I do not remember going home. I do not remember falling asleep. The next thing I remember is waking up. But I wasn't in my room. I was lying in a bed I had never seen before, in a bedroom that didn't belong to me. And the strangest thing about it wasn't that the room looked scary or wrong. It didn't. That was what made it so confusing. It looked completely normal. It looked like any ordinary kid's room. There was a T, Rex poster on the wall, green and blue, slightly faded like it had been hanging there for a long time. There were a couple Batman posters too, and they weren't perfectly straight. They looked like the kind of posters a kid would put up himself without caring if they were a little crooked. There was a simple wooden desk against one wall with a small lamp sitting on it. A TV sat on a stand nearby. The bed had a comforter that looked plain and familiar, the kind of bedding you'd see in 100 different houses. The whole room felt lived in. It didn't look staged. It didn't feel empty. It felt like someone actually slept there every night. I remember lying still for a few seconds, staring up at the ceiling and trying to understand where I was. At first, I wasn't even afraid. I was just confused. My first thought was that maybe I had stayed over at a friend's house and forgotten. Kids don't always think clearly right away when they wake up, especially if they've slept somewhere unusual. So I tried to make that explanation fit, but it didn't. I couldn't remember making plans to stay with anyone. I couldn't remember calling my parents to ask. I couldn't remember leaving practice with a friend or his family. Still, I told myself maybe I had just forgotten. Maybe I had fallen asleep in the car. Maybe I'd had some vivid dream and it was making everything feel strange. I sat up slowly and looked around the room again. That was when I noticed I was still wearing my pajamas. That stood out to me immediately, even at that age. They were my pajamas, the same pair my mom had bought me from Target a few months before. I knew them. I recognized the fabric, the pattern, the way the sleeves fit. And that made the whole thing even stranger. If I had gone to a friend's house after practice, when had I changed? Why would I have changed into pajamas there? And if I had changed, why didn't I remember doing it? Why didn't I remember bringing anything with me? That was the first moment the confusion started turning into something heavier. I got out of bed and walked to the bedroom door. My heart wasn't racing yet, but I had that unsettled feeling deep in my stomach, like I already knew something was wrong, even if I couldn't explain how. I opened the door and stepped into a hallway. Again, everything looked normal. There was sunlight coming through a window somewhere down the hall. The house was quiet in the way houses usually are in the morning, when people are awake but not rushing. It didn't feel haunted, or creepy, or dark. There wasn't anything dramatic about it at all. That was part of what made it so disturbing. It looked too normal, too ordinary, like I had somehow stepped into someone else's morning without permission. I walked downstairs. At the bottom, I saw a man sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee in his hand. He was watching the news like it was any regular day. In the kitchen, there was a woman cooking breakfast. I remember the smell hitting me right away. Eggs, maybe toast, something warm and familiar. The kind of smell that should have been comforting. She turned when she saw me, and she smiled. "Hey, hun," she said, "I'm making eggs, just how you like them." The second she said that, something inside me dropped. It was that deep sinking feeling you get when your body understands a danger before your mind catches up. I stood there staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. I remember asking, "Where am I?" She laughed a little, but not in a mean way, more like she thought I was joking around. "What do you mean?" she said. "You're home." I looked at the man on the couch. He barely reacted. He just kept sipping his coffee, eyes on the television, like this was a normal morning, and I was just acting odd for no reason. I took a few more steps into the room, still trying to stay calm. "Who are you?" I asked. The woman looked confused, but not scared. Not angry either. Just puzzled, like I was the one behaving strangely. That reaction made everything worse. If they had seemed threatening, maybe I would have understood it differently. If they had looked nervous or guilty, then at least it would have been clear something bad was happening. But they didn't. They acted like I belonged there, like I was the strange one for questioning it. I sat down at the kitchen table because I honestly didn't know what else to do. My mind was jumping from one explanation to another, trying to find something that made sense. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe I really was at someone's house and they thought I was kidding. Maybe I had hit my head. Maybe I was still dreaming. But even then, none of it felt dreamlike. That's important. It didn't feel fuzzy. It didn't feel surreal. It didn't feel like one of those weird childhood dreams where things change the second you look away. It felt solid, continuous, real. The light coming through the windows looked real. The smell of breakfast was real. The chair under me felt real. So I asked again, more seriously this time, "Where am I?" That was when the man finally spoke. He looked over at me and said, "You're at home, buddy. What's going on with you?" I remember saying, "This is not my house." Then they exchanged a look. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, just a quick glance between them, like parents silently asking each other what was wrong with their kid. Then the man said something that changed everything. "Hey, son, can you grab me that paper?" The word son hit me like a punch. That was the exact moment the whole thing stopped feeling confusing and started feeling terrifying. My heart began pounding, so hard I could hear it. I stood up so fast, the chair scraped across the floor. I said, louder this time, "You are not my parents. Who are you? Why am I here?" The woman had stopped cooking. The man leaned forward slightly. Their faces changed, and I remember that clearly too. They looked concerned, confused, maybe even scared, but not the kind of scared you'd expect from people caught doing something bad. More like they were worried about me, like I was the problem. That was the worst part. It made me doubt myself even in the middle of my panic. For 1 second, I remember wondering if I had gone crazy. That sounds dramatic now, but as a kid, that's the closest I could get to describing it. Everything around me seemed so certain, and I was the only one insisting it was wrong. Then instinct took over. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't wait for them to explain. I just ran. I bolted for the front door in my pajamas and slippers and threw it open. The air outside felt cooler than inside. I remember that detail clearly. I remember the feel of the concrete under my feet and the sound of my slippers smacking the ground as I ran. And then, almost immediately, I noticed something that made it all even worse. I recognized the neighborhood. Not the exact house, not right away, but the area around it. The streets looked familiar. The houses had that same general style. The layout made sense to me in a way I couldn't ignore. I knew where I was, sort of. It was on the other side of the main road from where I lived, in an area I didn't go to much, but it was still part of my neighborhood. That somehow terrified me more than if it had been somewhere completely unknown. If it had been some random place far away, maybe it would have at least made sense as a kidnapping or a mistake or something concrete. But this was close enough to be familiar and wrong at the same time. I ran all the way home. I don't remember slowing down. I don't remember stopping to think. I just ran until I reached my front door, burst inside, and stood there breathing hard, half crying, half trying to talk. And then I froze again, because inside my actual house, things looked almost the same. My dad was sitting on the couch with a cup of coffee. My mom was in the kitchen making breakfast. But it wasn't identical. That's the detail that has stayed with me all these years. If it had been exactly the same, maybe I could have convinced myself it was confusion from waking up too fast. But it wasn't. The similarities were obvious, and the differences were just as obvious. My dad wasn't watching the news. Some other random show was on TV. My mom wasn't making eggs. She was making pancakes and bacon. The light felt slightly different. The room felt slightly different. It was my house, but now everything I had just seen in that other house felt even stranger, like a version of my life shifted a few inches to the side. I started trying to explain everything at once. I was out of breath and panicked, and probably not making much sense. At first, my parents thought I was joking or overreacting. Then they got annoyed. Then, when they realized I really was scared, they got concerned. They told me that I had said I was staying at a friend's house after soccer practice. I had no memory of that at all. None. Not a little. Not vaguely. Nothing. They started calling around. They called the friend I was supposedly staying with. He said I never came over. His parents confirmed that he hadn't been there either. Nobody had seen me after practice. That was when the mood in the house changed completely. Now, it wasn't just me being dramatic. Now, there was actual missing time. My parents called the police. I told them everything I could remember. I described the house, the street, the room, the people, what they looked like, what they said to me. I told them about the T-Rex poster, the Batman posters, the breakfast smell, the man with the coffee, the woman at the stove. I tried to explain how normal it all looked, and how that was exactly why it had scared me so much. The police went to check the house. When they came back, they told us the house was vacant. Neighbors said nobody had lived there for years. A property manager came by once in a while to maintain it, but that was it. Inside, The police said it was dusty, not just a little dusty, empty house dusty, no food cooking, no signs that anyone had spent the night there, no warm breakfast, no lived-in bedroom with posters and a made bed, no trace of the couple I had spoken to. Nothing. Just an empty house. After that, things got strange in a different way. At first, my parents were worried. But as days passed and no real explanation appeared, that worry turned into frustration. Eventually, I think they decided that I had to be lying, or that I had made the whole thing up for some reason I couldn't explain. They kept asking me to tell them what really happened. They wanted me to admit I had snuck off somewhere, or made up a story to cover for myself, or confused a dream with real life. But I didn't have another version to give them. That was the problem. I wasn't hiding anything. I truly didn't know what had happened in the missing time after soccer practice. And the more I tried to explain the morning in that other house, the more impossible it sounded. So, after a while, life moved on. I got grounded for it. My parents stayed suspicious for a long time. Then, slowly, as weeks passed, everyone stopped talking about it. The routine of normal life came back. School, sports, chores, weekends, holidays. The event got pushed into the background like a weird family story nobody wanted to unpack. But I never forgot it, not for 1 second. Even now, decades later, I can remember it in ridiculous detail. The smell of the food, the angle of the morning light, the exact tone of the woman's voice when she said she was making eggs the way I liked them, the sound of my slippers on the pavement when I ran, the way my stomach dropped when the man called me son. That memory never softened the way old memories usually do. It never became vague around the edges. It stayed sharp. And that's a big part of why it still bothers me. In my mid-teens, it started affecting me more than I admitted. Sometimes the memory would come back out of nowhere. And when it did, I'd get this heavy, sick feeling. It wasn't just fear. It was more like a deep discomfort with reality itself. Like if something that clear and structured could happen and still make no sense, then what exactly could I trust? My memory? My senses? My own life? Eventually, I pushed enough that my parents agreed to let me see a psychologist. I told him everything, every detail I could remember. He listened carefully, and then told me about something called a false awakening. He explained that sometimes people can have dreams where they believe they have woken up and started going about their day, when really, they are still asleep. In some cases, he said, those dreams can be incredibly vivid. Not hazy dream vivid, but full sensory vivid. You see things clearly. You hear voices. You smell food. You feel textures. It all seems completely real. He also explained that the brain, especially a child's brain, can fill in gaps in ways that feel perfectly logical afterward. It can build a complete scene, a complete interaction, a complete memory, and then store it as if it actually happened. Basically, he said, your mind can create a full simulation and then file it away as real. On paper, that explanation made sense. Honestly, it still makes sense. If I were hearing someone else tell this story, I'd probably think the same thing. A kid gets overtired, forgets what happened after practice, has some kind of vivid dream or confused episode, and later locks it into memory as reality. That's not impossible. That's actually a very reasonable explanation. But the problem is the gap. That empty stretch of time after practice is still there, untouched by that explanation. If it was just a false awakening, then what actually happened after soccer practice? Where was I? Why did nobody see me? Why did the friend I was supposedly staying with say I never came over? Why did his parents say the same thing? Why was there this perfect blank space where the rest of the night should have been? That's the part I can't get past. You can explain almost anything away if you work hard enough. Kids imagine things. Memory is unreliable. The brain fills in blanks. Dreams can feel real. I know all of that. But this didn't feel like imagination. It didn't feel fuzzy, broken, or dreamlike. It felt organized. It felt real. It felt like I woke up somewhere I was not supposed to be, talked to people who thought I belonged there, and somehow found my way back. Therapy helped. I'll say that honestly. It helped me accept that I might never know exactly what happened. It helped me stop chasing an answer every single day. It helped me live with the fact that some experiences don't fit neatly into any explanation. But it never erased the memory. Even now, every once in a while it comes back. Sometimes for no reason at all. I'll be lying in bed on a quiet morning, or making coffee, or driving somewhere, and suddenly I'll think about that room again. That T-Rex poster, those crooked Batman posters, that woman smiling at me like she knew me, that man calling me son. And instead of pushing it away like I used to, I find myself going back through it, piece by piece, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out what actually happened in that missing time, trying to decide whether the psychologist was right, whether my brain really can create something that complete and preserve it so perfectly. Most days, I think maybe that's the answer. Maybe the human mind is stranger than we want to admit. Maybe one lost evening and one vivid false awakening are all this was. And then I think about how real it felt. I think about running home. I think about opening my front door and seeing my actual parents in positions that were almost the same, but not quite. I think about the police telling us the house was empty. And then I'm right back where I started. Still wondering. Still missing that chunk of time. Still unable to say with complete honesty that it was only a dream. I don't know what happened to me that night after soccer practice. I don't know where I was. I don't know who those people were, or why they acted like I belonged there, or why that house felt lived in to me when the police said it had been empty for years. All I know is that I remember waking up there. I remember the room. I remember the smell of breakfast. I remember the fear. And after all this time, I still don't have an answer that feels big enough to hold all of it. Story 4. The first one started about 2 months ago. At first, it didn't feel serious. It was just a strange thought, like a small itch in the back of my mind. Not something I came up with myself, but something that felt placed there, like a quiet voice, or a suggestion that didn't belong to me. Drop your toothbrush in the toilet. It didn't make any sense. There was no reason for it. It just kept repeating. I ignored it. For a few days, I treated it like any other weird thought people get. Everyone has random, stupid ideas pop into their head sometimes. I figured it would fade away if I didn't pay attention to it. But it didn't go away. It got worse. Over the next week, it started taking up more and more space in my mind. It wasn't just a thought anymore. It came with images, with this strange pressure, like something inside me was pushing me toward doing it. Every time I brushed my teeth, I could feel it there, waiting, reminding me. The idea stopped feeling random. It started to feel necessary, like the only thing I needed to do to fix something I couldn't even explain. Eventually, I gave in. One morning, without really thinking about it, I picked up my toothbrush and dropped it into the toilet. The second I did it, everything changed. I felt perfect. That's the only word I can use. My body relaxed instantly. The tension I didn't even realize I was carrying disappeared. My thoughts cleared, like someone had wiped my mind clean. My vision sharpened. Colors looked brighter. Even my skin felt different, like I had suddenly become healthier. It felt right, like I had done exactly what I was supposed to do. For the next 2 weeks, everything in my life felt better. People treated me differently. I felt more confident, more alive. It was like I had unlocked something. And then, just like that, it was gone. The feeling disappeared, and something new replaced it. Spill your coffee at work? This time, it hit harder. My body felt awful, heavy, sore, like I had been sick for days. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked sunken, my skin dull and gray. I knew what I had to do. I went to work like normal, trying to act okay. In the kitchenette, my coworker Bill noticed immediately. "Man, you look terrible," he said. "You feeling all right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just didn't sleep much. That's what the coffee's for, right?" He nodded, not fully convinced. "Yeah, but if you still feel bad later, maybe go home early." I gave him a thumbs up as he walked out. Then I did it. I picked up my coffee and turned it over, spilling it across the floor. The dark liquid spread over the tiles, messy and pointless. And just like before, relief. Warm, overwhelming relief. The pain in my body disappeared instantly. My mind cleared again. Again. For about a week, I felt amazing. Then the next command came. "Tell Beth you hate her." This time, I didn't even question it. I was already starting to feel terrible again. My body hurt constantly. Every movement felt like effort. I didn't have the energy to resist anymore. I called her. She answered quickly. "Hey, is everything?" "I hate you," I said. There was a pause. A sharp inhale. "What the—" "I'm sorry," I started. But it was too late. The feeling hit. That same wave of calm and happiness. I hung up immediately. I didn't want to deal with the consequences. I didn't care in that moment. I just sat there, letting the feeling wash over me, enjoying it while it lasted. I even called in sick and stayed home, just sitting on the couch, moving slightly just to feel that strange, perfect sensation again. But this time, it didn't last as long. By the third day, it was already fading, and there was no new command yet. That was the worst part, because as the feeling faded, my condition got worse than before. The pain came back stronger. My body felt weak, shaky, like it was breaking down. At work, Bill noticed again. "Hey, I don't want to sound rude, but you look really bad," he said. He wasn't wrong. I was sweating, barely able to focus. My hands were shaking. "I'm just tired," I said weakly. "Just need to get through the day." He didn't believe me, but he didn't push it. Then it came. Follow Bill home. This time, I hesitated. I didn't want to do it. I stood in the parking lot after work, watching him leave, telling myself I wouldn't follow him. But I did. I got in my car and drove after him. I kept my distance, barely able to focus through the haze in my vision. I followed every turn he made, barely thinking, just obeying. Eventually, he stopped. He must have noticed me. He got out of his car and walked straight toward mine, angry. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Are you following me?" I couldn't answer properly. He looked at me like I was something disgusting. "What is wrong with you?" he said. "I'm not on drugs," I muttered. "Just, let's go to your house and talk." He stepped back immediately. "You're not going anywhere near my family." I tried to get out of the car, but I stumbled, nearly falling. He looked scared now. "Stay away from me," he said. "I'm serious." He turned to walk away, and I lost control. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I grabbed the tire iron and hit him. He dropped instantly. Everything after that is a blur. I remember dragging him. I remember his body feeling heavy. I remember getting into the car again. But I don't remember the drive. The next clear memory I have is standing in front of his house, holding the tire iron, his body next to me. There was no relief that time, no happiness. Just nothing, no pain, no feeling. I left. I ran. I didn't go back to work. I didn't go home. I threw my phone away after the calls started coming in. My parents, my coworkers. Beth, that was 4 commands ago, each one worse than the last. The breaks between them are gone now. They don't stop. One command ends, another begins. They push into my mind constantly, forcing me to plan, to act, to keep going. I barely feel human anymore. When I catch my reflection, I don't recognize the person staring back. The only reason I'm writing this right now is because I was told to. Even this isn't my choice. And now, there's another one. It's already there, scratching at the back of my head. Louder than all the others. Worse than all the others. I don't want to do it. I need someone to stop me. Please. I just want this to end. But I know I'm going to do it anyway. Story 5. I have long believed that there is more to this world than what we can see. It feels as if reality is covered by something thin, something fragile, like a veil stretched over everything. Beneath it, there are things we are not meant to understand. Things too vast, too strange, too overwhelming for the human mind. Whether that veil was placed there by something divine or something far older and more distant, I cannot say. But I believe it exists for a reason, to protect us, because whatever lies beyond it is not meant for us. And yet, something has crossed through. Maybe it slipped through a crack. Maybe we opened the door ourselves without realizing it. Or maybe it has always been here, touching us in small ways, shaping our stories, our beliefs, our fears. That is what I have spent my life trying to understand. I study folklore, not to dismiss it, not to explain it away, but to find what might be true beneath it. Every myth comes from somewhere. A warning becomes a monster. A sickness becomes a curse. A strange place becomes sacred or forbidden. Most people look at these stories and see imagination. I look at them and see patterns, clues, signs that something else has been here all along. For years, I traveled to ancient places around the world, searching for proof. I found hints, fragments, strange consistencies across cultures that should never have shared anything. But nothing ever gave me certainty. Until I went to Ireland. The village was not on any official map. I only found references to it through scattered accounts, passed quietly between locals who did not want to speak too much about it. When I finally asked directly, they gave it a name. An Squite. The severed place. They spoke it carefully, as if even saying the name might draw attention. When I asked why it was called that, they did not answer directly. They only warned me that if I felt drawn to it, I should not follow that feeling. I ignored them. I had spent too many years searching to turn back now. I gathered a small team of colleagues, people I trusted, and hired a local tracker named Seamus to guide us through the woods. We told him it was just an expedition. He did not seem afraid at first. The forest itself felt wrong. It was thick, ancient, and silent in a way that made you feel like you were being watched. Every step we took felt like we were pushing into something that did not want us there. The trees twisted in unnatural ways, their branches clawing at the sky like they were trying to escape something beneath them. After hours of cutting through dense growth, we reached a clearing. The air smelled of smoke. The village stood ahead of us, made of simple wooden structures, like something from centuries ago. It looked out of place, like a mark left behind by human hands in a place that did not belong to us. But what caught my attention first was the shape of the clearing itself. It was perfect, a near-perfect circle carved into the forest. Around its edge, small smooth stones had been placed carefully, one after another, with almost no space between them. They looked too perfect, too deliberate. And carved into many of the trees was a symbol, a serpent, not like any I had seen before, though it carried familiar elements. It was circular, coiled around something at its center. Its mouth held a smaller circle, while its body wrapped around another. 2 circles, 2 worlds perhaps, one inside, one protected, or one trapped. We crossed into the clearing. Seamus hesitated. He did not want to go further. It took convincing, even money, to make him continue. As we walked toward the village, the smell changed. It became sweet, too sweet, mixed with something metallic underneath. It reminded me of cooked meat, but wrong. My team seemed curious, even excited. Seamus looked terrified. When we reached the edge of the village, he stopped completely. Nothing we said could make him continue. He turned and left, whispering something in Gaelic as he disappeared back into the forest. At the time, I thought he was a coward. Now, I think he was the only one of us who understood what we were walking into. We entered the village. It was empty. There were signs of damage everywhere. Doors torn open, windows shattered, tools scattered across the ground. One building had burned completely, still smoldering. But there were no bodies, no signs of where anyone had gone. The houses themselves looked old, very old. No electricity, no modern tools, nothing that suggested recent life. Everything inside looked like it belonged to another century. We moved deeper. At first, the paths made sense, but soon they became narrow, twisting passages between buildings. The layout stopped making sense. We walked longer than we should have, given how small the village looked from outside. It felt like the place was stretching, changing. And then I heard it, a sound, soft, musical, like chimes mixed with whispers. No one else reacted, but I could hear it clearly. It felt like it was inside my head. We tried to map our path, but the layout did not match reality. The distances were wrong. The angles did not make sense. Before we could figure it out, we heard something else. A roar, deep, powerful, and filled with rage. Then it came. A man. At least, that is what it looked like at first. He was massive, strong beyond anything natural. But his body was wrong. His skull had been pierced by human ribs, forming horns. His chest was hollow where those ribs should have been. He moved with pure violence. Before we could react, he killed one of us instantly. Another tried to fight back. It did not matter. The thing tore through us like we were nothing. We only survived because we found its weakness, its heart. When it finally fell, we stood there in shock. 2 of us were dead. The others wanted to leave. I did not, because I knew then that this place was real. Everything I had searched for, it was here. So I led them deeper, through paths that did not exist, through shapes that felt like symbols made real. We reached the center, and that is where everything ended, or began. I cannot fully explain what happened there. I remember a mound of bodies, not dead in a violent way, but intertwined, as if they had chosen it. I remember a voice asking me for my name, offering to save my companion, and I remember choosing, not him. I chose knowledge, and I was shown something I cannot describe, something my mind cannot hold. When I woke, everything had changed. My companions were gone, their names gone, their faces gone, like they had been erased from me. All that remains is the knowledge that they existed, and that I traded them for something I cannot remember. Now, I sit here, changed. I see things differently, patterns where there should be none, meanings hidden inside simple things. And on my desk, there is a stone, smooth, perfect, like the ones that mark the edge of that place. I do not remember bringing it back, but I know what it means. It is part of the boundary, part of the seal, and I do not know what happens if it is removed. I still think about the serpent, the one carved into the trees, the one holding one world in its jaws while guarding another. I do not know which world is which, but I know this. The veil is real, and it has already been broken once. Story 6. Growing up, it was never unusual for my parents to complain about my room. They always said it was messy. And, to be fair, it usually was, but not in the way people imagine when they hear that word. I was never dirty. I didn't leave food containers rotting under the bed or piles of laundry smelling up the place. My room was just disorganized. Books leaned against each other on the shelf, like they were too tired to stand straight. Pens rolled across my desk and disappeared under loose papers. Drawers stayed half open because I never bothered to close them all the way. Small things ended up on the floor and stayed there until I noticed them days later, even when there were clothes scattered around. It was usually just a shirt or two I had tried on while getting ready and then tossed aside without thinking. I've always been clumsy too. I lose things easily. I knock things over. I set something down and immediately forget where I put it. Most of the time, I don't even bother fixing the little messes I make right away. Still, I like to think I keep things under control. I make my bed every day. I sweep when I realize too much dust has built up. I tell myself that as long as the room is livable, it's fine. The problem is that once the clutter starts piling up, it becomes harder to find anything. My bedside table disappears under random things. My desk becomes a map of unfinished tasks and forgotten items. And somehow, that is always when I need something the most. I can't count how many times I've stood in my room, already late, already annoyed, muttering the same words under my breath. It was right here. I swear it was just here. My mom would usually hear me from the kitchen or the hallway and answer with that same tired tone she always used when she thought I was being dramatic. Sometimes she would click her tongue and tell me to look properly. Sometimes she would barely look up from what she was doing. I would keep searching, getting more irritated the longer it took. Then later, like always, she would show up at my door holding the thing I had been tearing the room apart over. Or worse, she would just point to it where it sat in plain sight, as if it had been there the whole time, and I had somehow missed it. I would take it from her, embarrassed and annoyed with myself. That was always the story. I was careless. I was clumsy. I was blind to my own mess. And for most of my life, I accepted that. I know how all this sounds. A messy person loses things, then finds them again. End of story. But lately, it hasn't felt that simple. A few weeks ago, I was almost in tears over a pair of earphones. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm attached to them in a way I can't explain without sounding dramatic. I hate going anywhere without them. I always have music playing when I'm outside alone, on the walk to the bus stop, while sitting on the bus, walking across campus, even when I'm just standing in line somewhere. It helps with my social anxiety. It gives me something to focus on, besides the people around me. Without music, I feel exposed in a way that's hard to describe. So when I couldn't find them, I panicked more than I probably should have. I searched everywhere, under the table, between the couch cushions, inside my bag, under my bed, in the laundry basket. I checked my desk twice, then my jacket pockets, then every shelf in my room. I even pressed down on the mattress and ran my hands over the sheets, like maybe they had somehow slipped into the bed itself. Nothing. Before I left for campus, I told my mom about it and asked her to let me know if she saw them. She barely reacted, just gave me a distracted nod like she had heard this exact complaint too many times before. When I got home that night, the earphones were still missing. By then, I was too tired to keep tearing the room apart. I changed, got into bed, and fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up to my mom shaking my shoulder lightly and telling me dinner was ready. Still half asleep, I asked her if she had found my earphones. She made that soft, unimpressed sound she always makes when she thinks I'm wasting her time. "No, I haven't," she said. Then she paused, glanced past me, and rolled her eyes so slightly I almost missed it. "Clearly, you didn't look properly. They're right there, beside you." I frowned and turned my head. My earphones were sitting on my pillow. Not tangled, not half hidden under the blanket, not caught between the mattress and the wall. They were neatly coiled, placed right beside my face, like someone had set them there carefully while I slept. For a few seconds, I just stared at them. I don't remember picking them up. I just remember the strange, cold feeling that passed through me before I forced myself to ignore it. I assumed my mom must have found them and forgotten to tell me. That made the most sense. So I accepted it, even though something about it didn't feel right. Then it happened again, and again. The next time it was my favorite blue pen. I couldn't find it anywhere. Then, later, it was back in my drawer. Maybe I had missed it, I told myself. Maybe I hadn't checked carefully enough. Then, it was my textbook. That one bothered me more. It wasn't some small object that could disappear easily. It was big, thick, heavy, the size of an A4 notebook, and it made a dull thud if you dropped it on the floor. The night before, I had been reading it at my desk. I remembered that clearly. I had even folded the corner of one page because I was too lazy to find a bookmark. The next morning, it was gone. I checked the desk first, then the floor around it, then the bed, then the chair, then the shelf, even though I was sure I hadn't put it back there. The more I searched, the more annoyed I became. I kept telling myself I was just doing what I always do, losing track of things in my own room. When I got home and stepped inside my room, the book was sitting at the exact center of my desk, closed, perfectly straight, lined up neatly with the edge of the table. The folded page corner was gone too, smoothed flat, as if it had never been bent at all. I stood there staring at it for so long that I started feeling stupid. I tried to tell myself I had moved it without thinking, that maybe my mom had come in and tidied it up, but neither explanation really fit. My mom doesn't tidy like that. That's the thing. She either leaves my mess alone or complains about it loudly enough that I know she noticed. She doesn't quietly come into my room and straighten objects by a few centimeters. She doesn't smooth page corners or place things exactly in the middle of surfaces. And she definitely doesn't spend her day fixing tiny details in my room. I'm 21. She has better things to do. After that, I started paying closer attention. At first, it was small things. I would notice the angle of a pen on my desk. I would leave a coin near the edge of the table. I would set my charger down, loosely instead of wrapping it properly. Then I'd leave for class or go out with friends. And when I came back, sometimes everything would be exactly as I left it. Other times, it wouldn't. The pen would be straightened, perfectly parallel with the edge of the desk. The charger would be coiled more neatly. The coin would be in my drawer instead of on the table. Not gone, just moved. That somehow felt worse. If things had simply vanished, I could still blame myself. But they weren't disappearing forever. They were being handled, rearranged, put back in places I hadn't chosen. One evening, I decided to test it properly. Before leaving for campus, I took off one of my earrings and set it in the middle of my pillow. It was a small silver stud, bright enough to catch the light, impossible to miss if you looked at the bed. I didn't tell my mom. I made sure of that. When I came home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I walked straight to my room and pushed the door open. The earring was gone. I stood there staring at the bed, then at the floor around it. Then I started checking everything anyway, even though I knew I wouldn't find it. I searched the sheets, the pillowcase, the floorboards, the desk, the drawer beside the bed. Nothing. Then I heard a voice right behind me. "Losing your stuff again?" I froze so hard it hurt. I hadn't heard my mom come upstairs. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't heard the floor creak. She was just there. I turned and tried to keep my voice calm. "Did you take my earring?" "What earring?" "The one on my bed. I left it there this morning." She gave me the most confused look. "Why would I go into your room just to take one earring?" I hesitated before asking, "Have you been moving my stuff lately?" That question seemed to annoy her more than confuse her. She sighed, the way she always does when she thinks I'm overthinking something stupid. "I don't have time to keep track of your things, Alice," she said, and then she turned and walked away. I stood alone in my room after that, looking around. Everything seemed normal. Same books, same papers, same half-open drawer, same clothes on the chair. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in a way I couldn't see. It was like walking into a familiar place and realizing all at once that the air felt different. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying all the little incidents in my head, all the times things had gone missing and come back, the way objects were never just found randomly, but placed, centered, straightened, returned almost too neatly. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. The next part is the one I still don't know how to explain. I woke up in the dark, but not fully. It was one of those strange half-waking states where your body feels heavy and your thoughts move slowly. I heard a soft sound near my pillow, like fabric brushing against fabric. Then I felt the space beside me on the bed dip slightly, as if someone had sat down. My first thought was my mom. Even in my sleep-fogged state, that was what my mind reached for. Maybe she came in to wake me for something. Maybe she wanted to ask me a question. But even then, something about it felt wrong. My mom doesn't come into my room in the middle of the night and sit on my bed in silence. I kept my eyes shut. I don't know why I did that. Instinct, maybe. Fear. Something in me knew not to move. I tried to breathe quietly. A few seconds passed. Then something touched my hair. A strand that had fallen across my face was brushed back gently, then tucked away the way someone might do without thinking. The touch made my skin go cold. The fingers didn't feel familiar. They were rough, calloused. Not painful, not forceful, just unmistakably wrong. The skin felt dry against my temple and cheek. I remember that detail clearly, too clearly. I stayed still. I kept my eyes closed so tightly it hurt. I don't know how long it lasted. A few seconds. Maybe much longer. Time felt strange in that moment. All I knew was that I was lying there completely frozen, listening to the quiet, waiting for something else to happen. Eventually, I opened my eyes. The room was empty. No one was there. My bed looked the same. My desk looked the same. My curtains stirred slightly from the fan. Everything was ordinary. At some point after that, morning came. Sunlight pushed through the window, and with it came that soft, stupid relief you feel after a nightmare, when you realize it was only a dream. That was what I chose to believe. I wanted to believe it. I told myself I had been overtired, that I had scared myself with my own thoughts, that my brain had turned anxiety into something physical. Then I turned my head. My earring was resting on the pillow beside me. I remember staring at it until my eyes started watering. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. Whether what happened that night was real or not, I pushed it down and tried not to think about it. It was easier that way. Easier to call it stress. Easier to blame bad sleep and an overactive mind. So I went back to my normal life. Classes, assignments, readings, hanging out with friends, going out more often than I probably should have. I kept myself busy enough that I didn't have time to sit alone with the thought of it. And for a while, that worked. Nothing strange happened. Nothing went missing. Nothing came back in the wrong place. My room stayed the usual kind of messy, and that was almost comforting. It felt normal again. I could breathe without wondering if something unseen had been touching my things while I was gone. Then, a few days ago, it happened again. That was what made everything worse, because by then, I had stopped waiting for it. I was just looking for my cigarettes. I smoke menthols, and because my mom hates it, I keep the pack hidden behind a row of books on my shelf. It's a stupid hiding place, but it works well enough because she never looks there. I always put the pack back in the same spot. Always. It's one of the few things I'm careful about. That evening, I reached behind the books and felt nothing. I moved the books aside, one by one. Still nothing. I checked my desk, my bag, the floor, even the jacket I had worn the day before. Nowhere. The second I realized they were really gone, that same awful tightness returned to my chest. It was instant, like my body remembered before my mind did. My first thought wasn't that I had misplaced them. My first thought was that something had taken them. I got angry at myself for even thinking that. I told myself I was not doing this again. I was not going to spiral over a cigarette pack. I already had plans. And I wasn't going to ruin my whole night standing in my room tearing books off the shelf and imagining things. So I left. It was around 8, already dark outside. The streetlights in our area are terrible. Some flicker constantly. Some barely cast enough light to make a difference. Others just glow weakly, making everything look dull and washed out. The air felt colder than it should have, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me as I walked. I kept thinking how badly I wanted one of those cigarettes. I put my earphones in and turned the music up, letting it fill my head the way it always does. Usually that helps. Usually it makes the world feel smaller and safer. Then I heard it. At first, it was just a faint rustle in the bushes along the side of the street. I slowed down. The sound stopped. I stood there, one ear still full of music, the other straining against the quiet. Nothing moved. Nothing came out. After a few seconds, I started walking again. Then it came back, softer this time, like something shifting carefully through leaves. I didn't turn my head. I just kept walking a little faster now, pretending not to hear it. That was when something came out of the bushes. Not lunged, not thrown hard. It was tossed. That's the only word for it, but even that doesn't fully capture how deliberate it felt. It came out in a small, controlled motion, like someone underhanded it just enough to send it sliding into my path. I heard it before I fully saw it, a light papery thud against the road. Then a short scraping sound. As it dragged awkwardly over the rough surface, it landed, tipped onto one edge, rolled once, maybe twice, then stopped right in front of my shoe. For a moment, I just stared at it. It was my cigarette pack, same brand, same half-peeled plastic wrapper, same crease in one corner where I had bent it earlier that week. Mine. There was no mistaking it. I felt my whole body go still in a way I don't think I've ever felt before. My brain seemed to freeze, like it needed more time than normal to understand what I was seeing. The music in my ears suddenly felt too loud and too far away. I didn't pick the pack up right away. I couldn't. I kept staring at it because something deep inside me was already telling me not to look toward the bushes, not to move, not to do anything that might acknowledge whatever had placed it there. And in that moment, I had the strongest feeling I've ever had in my life, that if I stayed where I was, something else would come out next. Not thrown, not slid across the ground. Something alive, something patient, something that had been in my room when I wasn't there, something that knew where my things belonged better than I did, something that could brush my hair back in the dark and return an earring to my pillow by morning, something that, for reasons I still can't understand, keeps taking pieces of my life only to hand them back when it chooses. I don't remember deciding to move. I just know that one second I was standing there, and the next, I was backing away so fast, I nearly tripped over my own feet. I left the cigarettes where they were. I didn't look back. I kept walking, then almost running, until I reached the brighter part of the road, near the main street, where there were more cars, and more people, and enough light to make me feel less alone. My heart was beating so hard it made me feel sick. I wish I could say I told someone after that. I didn't. What would I even say? That something in my room has been straightening my things? That lost items don't just come back, they get returned? That something hidden in the dark tossed my cigarette pack back to me like it was answering a game we had both been playing? I know how insane that sounds, but I also know what I saw. Since then, I've started noticing every small sound again, every shift in my room at night, every tiny change in where I leave things. I catch myself memorizing the position of objects without meaning to. A ring near the lamp, a lighter on the shelf, a notebook left half open. Then I leave the room and come back wondering if I'll find them altered. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes that feels worse. Because now I don't know if it's stopped, or if it's only waiting until I notice again. I haven't told my mom any of this. I already know what she would say, that I'm tired, that I'm anxious, that I lose things because I never put anything back properly. And maybe she's right about that part. Maybe I am careless. Maybe I always have been. But carelessness doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain the earphones on my pillow. It doesn't explain the textbook centered neatly on the desk. It doesn't explain the earring beside my face after I woke up. And it definitely doesn't explain that cigarette pack sliding to a stop at my feet from out of a dark bush when I had just spent 20 minutes searching for it at home. I don't know what it wants. That might be the part that scares me most. If it hated me, if it wanted to hurt me, maybe something obvious would have happened by now. But this feels different, almost intimate, like it knows me too well, like it has been studying the shape of my life through the little things I lose. Maybe it likes the mess. Maybe it likes touching the things I forget. Maybe it likes that I can never prove any of it. Sometimes I catch myself wondering whether it has always been there, even when I was younger, even before I noticed anything. Maybe all those times my mother pointed to some lost object in plain sight, it wasn't there because I had missed it. Maybe it had only just put it back. I hate that thought more than anything else. Because if that's true, then this didn't start a few weeks ago. It only became impossible to ignore a few weeks ago. Now I make my bed and stare at the pillows longer than I should. I straighten my books just to see if they'll stay that way. I avoid leaving earrings, pens, chargers, anything small and personal out in the open. I tell myself it's because I want to stay organized, because I'm trying to fix my habits. But that's not really why. The truth is, I don't want to give it anything else to touch. And still, every now and then, when I come back into my room, after being gone for a few hours, I stop in the doorway before stepping inside, just for a second, just long enough to wonder if something has been there in my absence. Standing where I stand now, looking over the same mess, quietly deciding what to borrow next. Story 7. Going to the pond used to be the most peaceful part of my life. There was a park nearby where families brought their kids to play. There were benches for people who wanted to rest, and tall trees that made everything feel cooler and quieter, even in the summer. The whole place always felt calm. Squirrels ran around without fear, so used to people that they would let someone walk right past them without even bothering to run. Birds nested in the branches. Dragonflies skimmed across the surface of the water, and of course, there were the ducks. Feeding them became my favorite thing to do on my days off. I would stop at the store early in the morning, buy a loaf of bread, and then head over to the pond before the place got crowded. I loved tearing off a piece and tossing it into the water, then watching the ducks rush toward it, splashing and bobbing as they fought over the crumbs. It was simple, cheap, and stupidly relaxing. No matter how bad work had been, no matter how annoying life felt, that little routine always made me feel better. At least, it used to. Now, I have been hiding in my house for days. I have not stepped outside. I keep the curtains closed most of the time, and when I do look out, I do it carefully, slowly, praying that they are not staring back at me. But they usually are. They are waiting for me, and not because they want bread. They want me. I know how that sounds. If I were hearing this from someone else, I would probably think they had snapped. I would think they were scared, sleep-deprived, or losing their grip on reality. Maybe I still sound that way. Maybe by the end of this, you will think I have gone completely insane. But I know what I saw, and I know what those things did. So I need to tell this from the beginning. I'm a photographer. More specifically, I'm a nature photographer, though I'm still pretty new to doing it professionally. I am not famous. I am not one of those people whose work ends up in magazines or galleries. But I've taken some shots I'm proud of. The best one I ever got was of 2 foxes in a field at sunrise. There was a butterfly between them, and I caught the exact second when one fox leaped up toward it, while the other bent low, getting ready to spring. Everything lined up perfectly. The lighting, the motion, the timing. It was one of those rare moments where you press the button and already know you got something special. That's the kind of thing I live for. So on Tuesday morning, after finishing a work project the night before, I decided to give myself a break. I had turned everything in, and for once, I had nothing hanging over my head. No deadlines, no editing, no emails I needed to answer. Just a free morning. I woke up early, feeling better than usual, and decided there was no better way to start the day than my normal pond routine. I left the house at 5:45 in the morning and walked to the supermarket. The streets were still quiet, with only a few cars moving through town. The sky was just starting to lighten, and that soft orange glow before sunrise was spreading through the clouds. I bought a bottle of orange juice, the kind without pulp, and a loaf of white bread. Then I headed to the pond. I'm not going to say exactly where it is. After what happened, I'm not putting that place in writing. But if you live anywhere near me, you might know the one I mean. It's one of those small local parks that people barely think about. Quiet, nice, easy to miss if you aren't looking for it. When I got there, the sun was still low, pushing a soft orange light through the trees. The water looked almost unreal, smooth and clear enough to reflect the sky like glass. The whole pond shone with this warm clementine color, and for a second, I just stood there taking it in. Then I heard them, quacking, splashing. I smiled right away because I knew exactly what it meant. The ducks were already there. Perfect, I said to myself as I pulled out my phone. I crouched down near the muddy edge of the pond and framed the shot. The ducks were scattered across the water, some dipping their heads under the surface, others drifting in the rising light. The reflection of the sunrise behind them made the whole scene look better than I could have planned. I took the picture. The sound from my phone made a few of them look up. Then the whole flock started moving toward me. First they swam in a loose cluster. Then they climbed onto the bank, waddling over in that clumsy, funny way ducks do. They quacked at me and bunched together in a messy line, waiting for breakfast. These ducks knew me. I had been feeding them long enough that they had started to associate me with bread. To them, I was probably some kind of weekly miracle. I always showed up with food, always early, always ready. Okay, I said, laughing a little. I've got enough for everybody. I opened the loaf and tore off a few pieces from the heel, giving them to the two ducks right in front. Then I took 3 full slices and tossed them farther into the water, making a few of the others paddle out for it. I liked watching them work for it a little. I fed them for a while, then sat down on a nearby bench with my orange juice and just breathed. The air was cool. The sky had shifted from orange to blue. White clouds drifted slowly overhead. Ducks splashed. Squirrels darted between trees. The world felt simple and clean in a way it almost never does. I remember thinking, there is no better feeling than this. Then I went home. The rest of the day was completely normal. I cleaned up a bit, answered a few messages, did laundry, edited a couple of older photos. Nothing strange happened. Nothing at all. The next morning, I planned to do the same thing. I woke up around 5:30 and got ready, but when I reached the supermarket, it was closed. There was a sign on the door saying the owner had gone on vacation for 2 weeks. That annoyed me more than it should have. I know it sounds ridiculous, but when a routine helps keep your head straight, even a small change feels bigger than it should. I stood there for a minute, holding my car keys, wondering if I should just forget it and go home. But I didn't want to. So I got in the car and started looking for another place that was open that early. There were no other stores within walking distance, and it took me around 20 minutes of driving to find anything at all. I know that sounds like a waste of time, but if you had one small thing that made your life feel manageable, you would chase it too. Eventually, I found a little shop that looked like a bakery. It was one of those old places that somehow seemed abandoned and open at the same time. I honestly can't remember the name now. Maybe I never really noticed it. I parked right in front and went inside. The second I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. There was no bread out on display, no pastries, no cakes, nothing. The whole place was strangely bare, and the smell hit me immediately. It was awful, thick, sour, and warm, like spoiled milk mixed with sweat. It reminded me of a dirty public bathroom in summer. I almost turned around right then, but I had already come that far, and the place was open. So I walked up to the counter and rang the little bell sitting there. A few seconds later, an old woman came out from the back. She was wearing an apron. The apron was covered in blood, not stained from old use either. Wet blood. Red chunks stuck to the front of it, like bits of raw meat. I must have reacted, because she gave me a puzzled look. "Is everything all right, child?" she asked. Her voice caught me off guard. It was soft and kind, almost comforting. She sounded like the sort of grandmother who would hand you tea and ask if you were eating enough. That voice did not match the gore on her apron at all. "Yes," I said quickly. "I'm fine, thank you." "What can I get you?" she asked, wiping her hands with a clean towel. "I was just looking for a loaf of bread," I said. "I think maybe I mistook this place for a bakery." She looked around, as though suddenly remembering what her shop was supposed to be. "Oh dear me," she said. "I thought I'd finished setting up. I just opened this morning. Sorry about that. You know how old age can be." She gave a light laugh, then smiled at me. "My name is Gretchen. I've actually just finished baking some fresh bread in the back. Would you like some?" I hesitated. The smell in the place was still terrible, and there was blood on her apron, but she seemed harmless, old, pleasant, a little strange maybe, and I had already spent most of the morning looking for bread. So I said yes. "One loaf, please. Dark." She disappeared into the back and came out 10 minutes later carrying a fresh loaf in a metal pan. The second I saw it, my stomach tightened. It looked wrong. Some parts were dark and overcooked. Almost. Other parts looked soft and underdone. The whole loaf had a pinkish red color to it, like it had been made from something other than dough. It looked less like bread and more like someone had shaped a loaf out of raw meat and baked it halfway. I said, trying not to sound rude. "What kind of bread is that?" She must have noticed the look on my face, because she smiled in a way that was meant to calm me. "It's an old family recipe," she said. "My grandmother used to make the loveliest bread. I learned from her book, then added my own little touch." "What's in it?" I asked. "Meat," she said brightly. "Hamburger specifically." That was enough to make me want to leave. Still, I had come all that way, and part of me was curious. I figured maybe it was some sort of savory loaf. Weird, but not impossible. Plenty of people bake strange things. I paid for it, thanked her, and left. She waved at me from the doorway with a huge smile, showing too many teeth. I drove straight to the pond. When I got there, the ducks were already in the water as usual, splashing around and diving now and then. The morning looked normal. The sky was brighter than the day before, and the pond, had that same peaceful look that had always pulled me in. I sat on a bench for a while, loaf in my lap, feeling disappointed that I didn't have normal bread. Then I thought, maybe it wouldn't matter. Ducks eat all sorts of things, right? A few little pieces wouldn't hurt. So, I tore off a chunk. The texture felt wrong in my hands. Too soft in some places, too stringy in others. Tearing it apart felt less like breaking bread and more like pulling meat off a cooked animal. That should have been enough to stop me. It wasn't. I tossed a few pieces into the water. At first, the ducks only looked at them. They tilted their heads, drifting closer without rushing. One duck pecked at a piece cautiously. Then it swallowed, and everything changed. The duck lunged for the rest of the pieces with sudden aggression, feeding the others to them before they could get close. It swallowed each one so fast, it barely seemed to chew. I tore off a few more pieces and threw them farther away, trying to spread them out. But the same duck chased every bit of it, cutting the others off and snapping the meat bread out of the air before it even hit the water. The rest of the flock grew restless, circling, quacking louder. "Hey," I said without thinking. The shout made some of the other ducks pull back. But not that one. That one came straight at me. It rushed up onto the bank and lunged for the loaf in my hand. I jerked it back and tried to swat the duck away, but it kept coming. Then it bit me. If you've never been bitten by a duck, it's sharper than you'd think. Their beaks look harmless, but it felt like getting caught in a heavy, jagged clamp. It latched onto my hand and would not let go. I shouted and tried to shake it off. The loaf fell to the ground, and while I fought that duck, the others rushed the bread. The duck on my hand bit harder. Its lamellae, those sharp ridges inside the beak, dug into my skin. I felt pain shoot through my whole arm. Then there was a tearing sensation so sudden and violent that I almost blacked out. It bit off my pinky. I screamed. The duck worked its beak like it was grinding meat. My finger was gone in seconds, turned into blood and crushed flesh. I fell to my knees, clutching my hand, trying to stop the bleeding. Tears blurred my vision, but through them I could still see the rest of the flock tearing into the loaf. They weren't eating it like ducks. They were devouring it, fighting, snapping, shredding through it like starving predators. By the time they finished, there were no crumbs left at all. Then every single one of them looked at me. That is the moment I understood something was truly wrong. I got to my feet and ran for the car. The ducks exploded into motion behind me, wings beating, claws scraping against pavement and mud. Some took flight. Others ran low and fast over the ground. It sounded like being chased by a swarm of engines. I barely made it to the car. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, and started the engine with shaking hands. The ducks were already hitting the windows and hood by the time I pulled away. I drove like a maniac. I didn't care about speed limits or stop signs. I only cared about getting away. In the rearview mirror, I could still see some of them following, flapping after the car in a broken, desperate wave. Then I noticed something worse. Not all of them were following me. Some had turned on other people. There were joggers out, dog walkers, a man crossing the street with a coffee, a woman in workout clothes near the path. The ducks swarmed them. I saw one man fall while ducks tore into his neck and face. A dog twisted free of its leash and ran screaming while 3 ducks clung to its side. A woman tried to shield herself with her arms, but the ducks ripped at her hands, her cheeks, anything they could reach. They moved with horrifying speed, like they knew exactly where to bite and how to tear. I drove home hearing screams behind me. When I got there, I slammed the car into the driveway, jumped out, and ran for the front door. I got inside just before the first duck hit the porch railing. I locked the door, then leaned against it, shaking and breathing so hard I thought I might pass out. Outside, the screaming went on. For a while it was everywhere. I stumbled to the bathroom and wrapped my hand as best I could. There was blood all over the sink, all over the floor, all over my shirt. I remember staring at the bandage and noticing my hand looked incomplete, wrong, like it belonged to somebody else. After about an hour, the screaming stopped. The silence afterward was worse. I finally forced myself to look outside. I moved the curtain just enough to see the street. Bodies were everywhere, on the sidewalks, in the road, in yards, and among them were ducks, pecking, tearing, feeding. There were more ducks than there should have been, not just the pond flock, ducks from everywhere it seemed, all gathered in the street, like the whole town had become a feeding ground. I threw up right there by the window. When I looked back, some of them were staring at the house, at me. I let the curtain fall. That was nearly a week ago. I haven't left since. I've been rationing what food I have in the house. Canned soup, rice, crackers, frozen meals. I probably have enough to last maybe a month if I'm careful. My finger is healing badly. I cleaned the wound and wrapped it, but it still throbs all the time. Sometimes I think I can feel the missing part. Sometimes I swear I can still feel the duck crushing it. I haven't heard sirens. I haven't heard helicopters. I haven't heard anything that sounds like help. The phone works sometimes, but the signal comes and goes. News sites barely load. Social media is a mess of half-posts, panic, and nonsense. Some people are saying there were animal attacks in several places. Some are saying it's a disease. Some are saying nothing at all, which is somehow worse. Every few hours, I look outside. They are still there, not always moving. Sometimes they just sit in the street or on the lawn, still as statues. Sometimes they clean their feathers. Sometimes they peck at whatever is left of the bodies outside. And sometimes they look directly at my window, waiting, patient. I used to think ducks were harmless, funny little birds, soft-looking things that floated on ponds and chased breadcrumbs and made children laugh. Now I know better. They do not care if you are alive or dead. They do not care if you are scared. They do not care if you fed them every week and thought of them as part of something peaceful. They only care about meat. And sooner or later, I am going to run out of food. When that happens, I will have to leave this house. And they know it. Good. Story 8. When I was a little girl, I once woke up in the middle of the night to the soft sound of an owl hooting nearby. It felt close enough that I thought if I hurried, I might actually see it. I jumped out of bed and ran toward the living room window, convinced that was the best place to look outside. I reached for the curtain, already imagining what it would look like perched somewhere in the dark. But before I could pull it open, my mother stopped me. She must have heard my footsteps. "You can't do that," she said softly, but there was something firm in her voice that made me stop immediately. "Sorry," I said, not meeting her eyes. "It's okay," she replied, guiding me gently away from the window. "But remember, you can't open the curtains at night. You might catch the attention of the witches." She walked me back to my room and tucked me in. I don't remember if I said anything after that. I just remember the way she held me for a moment longer than usual, like she wanted to make sure I stayed still. At some point, I fell asleep. In my town, Everyone knew the story. Owls weren't just birds. They were witches in disguise. They would transform at night and fly across the neighborhood, searching for someone. Once they chose their victim, they would land on the roof of their house and call out, announcing that death was coming. Sometimes that death came later. Sometimes it came immediately. There had been a case not long before that night. 2 houses down from us, a newborn baby had died in his sleep. The official explanation was SIDS. That's what the doctors said. But nobody in the neighborhood believed that. They said a witch had come. They said it had taken the baby's soul. After that, things were quiet for a while. The family moved away, and eventually, another couple moved into the house. Months passed without anyone hearing an owl at night, and slowly, people stopped talking about it. Life returned to normal, or at least something close to it. One morning, I went outside to our backyard to look for ladybugs. I loved them. Finding one meant good luck, or at least that's what I believed back then. I greeted our budgies as I always did, waving at them as they fluttered inside the large cage my father had built. "Good morning, birdies." They chirped back at me, and I smiled, but I was focused on my mission. I ran to the garden and started searching through the leaves and flowers. Every time I found a ladybug, I counted its spots carefully, then let it crawl onto my hand. I liked the way their tiny feet tickled my skin. When they flew away, I felt a little sad, but I always found another one quickly. Time passed without me noticing how much. It could have been minutes or hours. I was completely lost in what I was doing. Then the budgies started screaming. Not chirping, screaming. I turned around immediately. There was an owl perched near the cage, trying to reach inside. For a second, I forgot everything else. I ran toward it without thinking. As I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The owl was injured. There was blood on her wing, dark against her feathers. The budgies had gone silent now, and the owl had stopped moving. She was staring directly at me. "It's okay," I said softly, trying to sound calm even though my heart was racing. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't move. Her eyes stayed on me, sharp and still, though she glanced at the cage every now and then. "I'll get you Band-Aids," I said quickly, "and food. Please stay here." I ran inside before she could leave. I went straight to my room and grabbed as many Band-Aids as I could find. I didn't know how bad the injury was, and I wanted to be prepared. In my mind, Band-Aids fixed everything. They always made me feel better when I got hurt, so I thought they would help her too. When I came back, she was still there. I approached slowly this time, careful not to scare her away. When I reached out, I touched her head gently. Her feathers were softer than I expected, almost warm. "This might hurt a little," I told her, like she could understand me, "but it'll help." I lifted her wing and carefully placed 2 pink Band-Aids over the wound. She didn't struggle. She didn't try to bite me. She just watched me the entire time. Then I had another thought. She must be hungry. She had been near the cage, after all. I assumed she wanted the same thing as the budgies. Seeds. I didn't know any better. I didn't know what owls actually ate. I grabbed a handful of seeds and held them out to her. She stared at me again, for a long moment. I waited, holding my hand steady, hoping she would take them. Finally, she leaned forward, but instead of just taking the seeds, she bit my hand. "Ouch!" I cried, pulling back instinctively. It hurt more than I expected. When I looked down, I saw blood. That had never happened before. The budgies had nipped me sometimes, but never hard enough to break skin. The owl didn't move. She just stood there, watching me. Tears filled my eyes, but I told myself it had been an accident. I didn't want to believe she meant to hurt me, so even though I was scared, I held my hand out again. This time, she ate the seeds, all of them, even the ones stained with my blood. When she finished, she didn't make a sound. She simply spread her wings and flew away. I never told my parents the truth about what happened. I said I had tripped and cut my hand on a rock. They cleaned it, put band-aids on it, and told me to be more careful. That was it. A few nights later, I heard the owl again. The same sound. The same low, steady hoot. I stayed in bed. I remembered what my mother had said, and I didn't go near the window. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want it to see me. I just lay there and listened. That night, the owl didn't leave. Usually it would call out for a few minutes and then disappear. But this time, the sound continued for hours. It echoed through the night, over and over, until the sky began to lighten. I remember lying there, wide awake, wondering whose house it was on. I even caught myself hoping it wasn't my neighbor's. Don Cristobal made the best tortillas, and I wanted to visit him in the morning. When the sun finally rose, everything seemed normal. Nothing had happened. I went next door, just like I had planned, and ate breakfast with them. The adults whispered about the owl, about what it might mean, but nothing changed. No one got sick. No one died. Days passed. People started to relax. Maybe the owl had been wrong. Maybe it wasn't a witch. Maybe it was just a bird. I started to believe that too. Then it happened. I was outside with my parents, sitting and eating sandwiches, when I saw her again. The same owl. The band-aids were still on her wing. I opened my mouth to point her out, but before I could say anything, the ground began to shake. At first, it felt like a small tremor. Then it grew. The earth moved violently beneath us. The sound was overwhelming. Cracking, breaking, collapsing all at once. My parents shouted my name, reaching for me. But I couldn't move properly. It felt like the ground itself was pulling me away from them. In the middle of all that chaos, I saw the owl flying toward me. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was seeing. She was growing. Her body stretched and expanded until she was almost as large as my parents. Her wings spread wide, casting a shadow over me. Then she dropped down and covered me completely. Her wings wrapped around me, blocking everything out. I could still hear it all. My parents screaming, the houses collapsing, the ground splitting apart, but I couldn't see anything. I was trapped in darkness, surrounded by feathers. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The shaking ended. The noise faded. Silence filled the air. The owl lifted her wings and looked at me one last time. Then, she flew away. When I looked around, everything was gone. The houses, the streets, the people. My neighborhood had been destroyed. I was told later that I was the only survivor. When I tried to explain what had happened, no one believed me. They said it was my way of coping, that my mind had created something to protect me from the trauma. They said I imagined the owl, imagined being saved. But I know what I saw. I still carry the scar on my left hand from where she bit me. And sometimes, even now, I see her, flying overhead, watching. I know what she is. And I know one day she will land on my roof. And when she does, it won't be to save me.